Well, welcome back to Ottawa Exposed. I'm David Krayden, the senior parliamentary columnist for the Western Standard. It's a real pleasure to be back. How's February treating you? I hate winter, but at least it's been relatively mild throughout some of this month. Expecting some more snow here today, but that doesn't stop us from getting you the news you need to hear. And there's lots happening right now. And the story I'm going to introduce and begin with this morning is not necessarily the one you're going to read in the newspaper or online or see on television tonight, but believe me, it's probably the most important story of the week and of the month, because it really is important in terms of how our democracy in this country is functioning and how it's really dysfunctional. And I refer, of course, to this story about rabid Chinese interference in 2 Canadian elections. Now, we already knew there was possible interference in 2019 election in terms of Greater Toronto area candidates receiving funding from China. China has targeted candidates to win. Most of those candidates apparently were liberal. There might have been a conservative or two, but the verdict is still out on that, and there's an independent investigation going on in the House of Commons about that. And believe me, that's extremely, extremely important. We need to know what exactly happened in 2019. But just as we're wondering about 2019, 2021 is now a concern in terms of, did the Chinese influence and interfere in the 2021 election? Apparently they did. And I've got to applaud the work of my old friend Bob Fife, who was working at the Globe and Mail and at CTV, and Stephen Chase, who is also involved with this, as well as Global News. Now, these are media outlets that I have been critical of in the past because I think they sometimes tend to coddle Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. They give him a pass. They lob softball questions at him during news conferences. But I'm just as quick to say, hey, great job on this story, because we need to know. And I just want to read a portion here from the Globe story where Fife and Stephen Chase write, China employed a sophisticated strategy to disrupt Canada's democracy in the 2021 federal election campaign as Chinese diplomats and their proxies backed the re-election of Justin Trudeau's Liberals, but only to another minority government, and worked to defeat conservative politicians considered to be unfriendly to Beijing. The full extent of the Chinese interference operation is laid bare in both secret and top secret Canadian Security Intelligence Service documents that were reviewed by the Globe and Mail. So these documents are from CSIS. This is our intelligence gathering service. And unlike the United States, that has 13 intelligence gathering services, we only have 1, plus what is gathered by D&D. So we have really 2 in this country, but we do not have 13. So what CSIS comes up with in terms of intelligence is very important. And we need to know exactly what went on. Why did the Chinese government only want a minority government? I mean, what is up with that? But before we get into that, I want you to watch a brief clip from Bob Fife where he talks about what this information means.
The government has not been telling Canadians the truth. The best way to deal with these kind of interference and influence activity is to shine a light on it so that Canadians are aware of what is going on and can prepare to deal with it.
Now, I didn't think I'd ever hear that from the Globe and Mail. At least I haven't been hearing that from the Globe and Mail. But I tell you, what does that say? The government's not telling us the truth. Justin Trudeau is well aware of this Chinese interference. He was briefed on the 2019, and God knows CSIS would have told him about the 2021 interference. Now, is he shocked? He acknowledges, yes, he's acknowledged that there is some degree of Chinese interference. But is he outraged over it? Apparently not. His reaction was quite interesting because when he, at the news conference following the revelation that China had interfered, that they had basically bought an election, they had bought the 2021 election, a minority government for Justin Trudeau. What did Trudeau say? He said, let's hope CSIS hunts down these whistleblowers or whistleblower. Just watch this.
Monsieur Trudeau, vous vous faites rassurant par rapport aux résultats des élections.
You're very reassuring on the results of elections, Mr. Trudeau. But what are you saying? What do you have to say about the fact that people at CSIS are leaking secret documents? Isn't there some discomfort within those agencies regarding China? It's certainly a sign that security within CSIS needs to be reviewed, and I'm expecting CSIS to take the issue very seriously.
Well, there you go. He's more concerned that CSIS told the Globe and Mail about this, that the information is out there. He's not concerned that China's interfering so much as he is that somebody told on him. Somebody told on China. And obviously, this involves Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau has not been telling us the truth. He never tells us the truth. He never tells the whole truth, and sometimes never tells any of the truth. And this is absolutely outrageous, and I call for his resignation again over China. I've done that in the past, but clearly there is a problem between Justin Trudeau and China. Why did Justin Trudeau refuse to call the extermination of the Uyghur population in China a genocide? He was asked that at the last G20 summit meeting in Bali, and he refused to use that word genocide. He got into an argument, if you will, but it was more of a tongue lashing from Chinese dictator Xi Jinping, because Xi was very upset that Trudeau was releasing information about talks that he had had with China. So he gave him a thorough tongue lashing, told him to stop doing it, obviously. And Trudeau said nothing. He took it like the subservient politician he is to China, and he ran to the men's room after the conversation or the dialogue, but actually it was the dressing down occurred. Now, why would he react that way unless there's something that China knows about Trudeau and there's something Trudeau knows about China? When did Trudeau know this information? How much did he know about it? I would suggest he knew an awful lot as Prime Minister, who's getting briefings from CSIS all the time. But it goes back, doesn't it, to Trudeau's assertion, ludicrous assertion, when he was still an MP from Papineau, and he was at a Liberal fundraiser in Montreal arranged by Liberal women, and they asked him, what country in the world do you most admire? And Trudeau said, China. Trudeau said, I most admire China. And when he was asked why, he said, because they can turn their economy around on a dime, meaning they're a dictatorship that can force things to happen very quickly. They don't have to go through the democratic process like we do in Canada and the United States and European countries. Well, apparently China can also turn an election around on a dime, and many dimes were part of that process. China clearly bought an election in this country. That's unacceptable. And this has got to be the final nail in the Justin Trudeau coffin. How much more can we put up with this corrupt government? It's time to say enough is enough, and the Trudeau must go. I don't say that rhetorically. I say that in all insistence. It is time for him to go, because this is unacceptable, and we need to know more about what China has done and obviously is continuing to do in our democracy. And why did they just want a minority government? Why did they serve us up a minority government? Obviously, they like Trudeau to be powerful, but not all powerful. They like him to have some kind of controls put on him. Are they putting controls on him? I'd like to know that. We need to know more about this. And Trudeau, of course, is running from this story as fast as he can. Now, why do you think, and that takes us to the next story, why do you think the Emergencies Act inquiry report was released on Friday, February 17th, and not Monday, February 20th, like we all expected it to be? Big mystery. I think because the Chinese story came out in the Globe and Mail on February 17th, and Trudeau was hoping to distract our attention because the inquiry report from the Public Order Emergency Commission was very favorable to Justin Trudeau. I was a little surprised there wasn't some criticism of Justin Trudeau in this report, but it was all complete exoneration of this man's activities, decisions, and it said it was perfectly correct. And Justice Paul Rouleau concluded, he says, I have concluded that in this case, the very high threshold for caution was met. I have done so with reluctance. Why was there any reluctance? Now, you don't say, I firmly believe this man is innocent, but I say so reluctantly. Unless there's information out there you're not telling us, or you're considering information in your judgment that you're not including in your summation. And clearly the judge, Rouleau, did not tell us everything if he had reluctance about giving Justin Trudeau a pass and exonerating him in all things. And the funny thing is, I keep hearing about how the Emergencies Act invocation was necessary, even though the border protests had stopped because they could have started again. Well, that's like arresting somebody in anticipation of what they might do tomorrow or next week. And that's not how the legal system should work. If the convoy at Coutts, Alberta, and at the Windsor border decided it was time to stand down, well, then they stood down, and there was no need to use the police against them. And of course, the police were not used against them as part of the Emergencies Act. When the Emergencies Act was invoked, it only focused on Ottawa, on Wellington Street, where all of these truckers had their trucks parked, and protesters were standing around in the bitter February cold. I was there every day, getting frostbite on these fingers, and they were there every day. But that's where the focus was, not on any border crossings. There was no hint of insurrection or improper behavior or any sort of behavior that would have suggested there was going to be violence or an act against the government. These people had no intention of trying to take over the government. That is just a ridiculous lie that has come out of the haters who just couldn't stand the fact that the Freedom Convoy stood up to COVID-19 mandates. They couldn't stand that. So what is the legacy of this report? And we'll get shortly to what my favorite lawyer, Eva Chipiuk, has to say about it. But what is the legacy then? First of all, it's okay for the government to freeze your bank accounts if you're involved in a protest that they don't like. And if you donate, even if you donate your money to a protest that they don't like, because that's unacceptable. I remember the Justice Minister at the time saying that Canadians shouldn't be donating to Trump-style politics. Who the hell is he to say that we can't be donating to Trump-style politics or any kind of democratic action? He cannot make that call. But the point is, Justin Trudeau got away with this. So it's okay to freeze your bank accounts. And believe me, they'll do it again. If they got away with it this time over the Freedom Convoy, they'll do it again over a protest that they don't like and they don't want you to see. And I think that's important to remember. That's one of the legacies. of this report. But thankfully, Freedom Convoy lawyer Eva Chipiuk, who I interviewed this week in response to this report, she said this is not the final word. The judicial review is going to examine Judge Rouleau's decision on this to see if it is in fact correct, to see if it is in fact appropriate. So this is not the end of this process. Once again, we were told that was the end. No, it's not. It's not the end. There's going to be a judicial review of this in April. I'm glad Eva brought that up. And of course, her reaction to this was, I thought, quite categorical. She was very incensed that Judge Rouleau apparently ignored a lot of what went on during the Freedom Convoy and simply decided to exonerate Justin Trudeau. And I liked what Eva Chipiuk said. She said she was still fighting. And she said the report itself was a small battle. And there's a large war, she said, ahead in terms of maintaining freedom in this country, maintaining the ability of people to protest peacefully without being thrown in jail, having their bank accounts frozen, and having the draconian Emergencies Act brought down on their head, literally brought down on their heads with police using batons on their heads. And that's what happened. I was there. So don't tell me it didn't happen. I was there. I saw it. Journalists were injured. And old people were pushed out of the way. A Métis woman was trampled by a horse and she was using a walker to get around. I mean, that is unacceptable behavior. And if that's the way this government deals with people they don't agree with, that's unacceptable. And that's got to stop. But as Eva mentioned to me, none of this is carved in stone. None of this is carved in stone. It can be changed. And she also wants a $400 million class action suit against the Freedom Convoy protesters dismissed. And she's right, and she's quite right about that. But you know, she also mentioned that the response to Rouleau's report was not what Trudeau anticipated. It was not a massive applause of thank God this man recognizes the right for good order and good government, which that did not represent, by the way, represent an overreach of government. But as Eva pointed out, media here in Canada, in the United States, and in Europe criticized the decision because they said there was no threshold. There was no reason to invoke the Emergencies Act. And I find it interesting that once again, the Globe and Mail, which has been siding with the Liberal government in the past on many issues, the Globe and Mail editorialized on Monday, we disagree, for instance, with Rouleau's conclusion that the invocation was justified. Huge editorial decision. Very, very important. And that means the mainstream media is backing away from Trudeau, just as it is in the United States from Biden. But there's a clear break right now over China and over the Emergencies Act invocation. Clearly, a lot of the mainstream media are thinking twice about what Trudeau has done and what he continues to do as a prime minister. And I think this is very bad news for Justin Trudeau. And as I've said earlier, he wanted this to be a victory lap, and it's not. China came down. The Emergencies Act came down, but it didn't get the media response he anticipated. And forget about those UFOs that turned out to be American weather balloons. That's another cipher that didn't work for Justin Trudeau's re-election. And he is going to be pushing hard on healthcare. I can tell you that. And I have, as I mentioned in the past. Now, quickly now, I want to go into my last column, which was yesterday's, where we talked about Roxham Road, the notorious, infamous Roxham Road that goes from New York to Quebec. And it's where illegal immigrants have been crossing for about 6 years now. Why 6 years? Because you may recall in 2017, yes, on January 28th, Justin Trudeau put out a tweet that said, "To those fleeing persecution, terror, and war, Canadians will welcome you regardless of your faith. Diversity is our strength." That's his mantra. Yes. So what happened? People took him at his word. Forget about the immigration process. We'll just come to Canada. So they found ways to come to Canada. One of them was Roxham Road. It's basically just a passageway where there is it's an unofficial border crossing. Now the RCMP are stationed out there, but they just let people go by. They just process them and move them on. And of course, by 2018, 2019, we had a huge border crisis at that time. We had to establish 10 cities. Then we put tens of thousands of people up in hostels, in 3-star hotels, anywhere we could possibly put them, because we had so many. Now it's happening again. And it's intertwined with the disaster at the American southern border, where they have let in 1.2 million illegals since the inauguration of Joe Biden, President Joe Biden. So, and now there's illegals streaming into the United States via Canada. So what they're doing is they're coming into Canada and going through the northern border. So they've got it coming from both ways. America has no border anymore. Certainly the southern border has been dissolved. And Canada is in danger of losing its southern border with the United States as it continues. Because we need legal immigration, not illegal immigration that continues day after day after day. Joe Biden and Justin Trudeau are so concerned about Ukraine and its sovereignty and that its borders not be violated, but they apparently have little concern about their own country's borders being violated. And that's where their concern should be. They don't mind inviting a nuclear confrontation with Russia by arming Ukraine and by focusing on that as the major issue, but domestically they're losing it. So I want to end it there. Thank you for joining Krayden's Right. Become a subscriber to the Western Standard at www.westernstandard.news. You can see it on the ticker at the bottom. We want you to be a part of this experience. And that's what this is. New media is an experience. It's much more than it used to be. So thanking you for being here. My name is David Krayden. Bye for now.
Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Without the CSSA, our gun rights would have been taken long ago. These guys are on the front lines helping to draft smart and intelligent firearms regulations and legislation in Canada, and more importantly, educating the public about how we keep guns out of the hands of the wrong people. You become a member, it's absolutely worth every penny. You can become a Western Standard member for just $10 a month or $99